Welcome everyone to the first ever Underpunks podcast. Woohoo!
You seem very excited, Benita.
I am Jaydz. We have such a lovely community of role players. I'm really excited to talk to them.
Shall we roll the intro?
We have an intro.
We have a short audio from Bash and Truth that dates back to December 2021.
Hello Lama.
Hi Lama.
We love Underpunk.
I love those guys. Lama is my character name and GM name in Underpunks. Bash is almost a level 6 thief, and Truth is the stealthiest guard in game, and just about to open up a climbing business in Upshire. They're both level 5 singers.
We love you, Bash. We love you, Truth. So, what's the topic for today's podcast, Jaydz?
Actually, I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. The one D&D reveal trailer has been released on YouTube, and there's quite a lot of criticism online about how Wizards of the Coast's new sort of virtual tabletop app that they're going to be creating will be bad for the role-playing community. So let's talk about that.
I'll put a link in the description for those who haven't seen the video, but what's your views on this?
From the perspective of a D&D-inspired role-playing game developer, which I consider myself to be, and a long-time fan of Dungeons & Dragons, I'm also a lover and collector of obscure independent games and rulebooks.
Aren't you?
I believe this is a great thing for the entire tabletop role-playing community.
All right, well, before we dive into that subject, maybe you can explain your role-playing game, Underpunks. What's it about?
Underpunks is a retro-futuristic cyberpunk universe with hints of medieval magic, tiny dragons, and 1950s-style rocket ships, but the players' actions are also shaping the setting of the world.
It's a living world.
A living world with a very devoted fan base that is entirely played out on a digital platform, and yet it still delivers that nostalgic tabletop experience.
So technology can be good for pen and paper gaming, after all.
I think it's inevitable. Players are already stringing together a bunch of apps to play over the internet. We need someone with a big budget to do it right. Yes, it will have microtransactions because if it doesn't make money for Wizards of the Coast, it won't get any development love and it'll just fade away.
But doesn't that make it harder to play non-D&D games?
Well, a lot of people are saying that it'll kill this secondary marketplace where people buy the independent role-playing games, and that it'll kill all the third-party virtual tabletop apps.
Sounds dramatic.
Well, the biggest voices supporting this argument are the dungeon masters who live, breathe, and play a lot of D&D. But the bigger voice is the video content producers whose very business model is to actually spend more time talking about role-playing games than they do playing them.
D&D is still quite a difficult game to organise. I've seen you prepare for days just to do some of your tabletop games.
Yeah, it takes a long time and it depends. Sometimes you can put in that effort and the work you've put in to preparing for the game doesn't even sort of get played. The players will spend their time doing something else. But the average role-playing fan who can actually afford to purchase all the books and all of the products just doesn't have the time to play the game in a convenient way.
And nothing in life is constant, Jaydz.
Not even death.
You were bullied at school, weren't you, for liking D&D?
I was actually one of about 4 kids who were bullied in high school, and I mentioned 4 kids to give you a scale of how sort of unpopular it was. It was a massive high school, and there was literally just 4 of us who were interested in Dungeons & Dragons. We were bullied for even mentioning the words fantasy, roleplay, and game.
It's come such a long way since then.
I can't believe how much it's evolved. Since that time in high school, we've lost touch with friends, married, had children, divorced, taught our kids to role play, had our children leave home, get jobs, and our children are having children of their own.
The terms fantasy, role play and game are cool now though. Like Netflix is a sea of fantasy shows.
It's very cool now. You don't get your head flushed down the toilet like I did for talking D&D anymore. And the tabletop role players of the 80s were the very same people who owned the first computers, like myself. And we ported our love for tabletop games into the creation of video games, which is now a much bigger industry.
Isn't it just? And nostalgia always wins.
Nostalgia always wins. It may take 30 years, but when it hits, when the kids leave home and the wallet comes out, you can be a teenager once more. And this time, with more money, you can dedicate an entire room in your house to tabletop gaming.
What is D&D at its core?
I actually think for most people, D&D is a nostalgic desire to play, but this desire to play is constantly thwarted by an ever-changing reality.
I get it. You spend more time talking to your wargaming mate than you do playing.
We're literally chasing the dragon, and that dragon is an elusive nostalgia for a time when you could roll dice uninterrupted all weekend in the cloistered safety of your mother's basement or garage.
And your Underpunks roleplay game, what does it give the players?
The primary objective of Underpunks is to deliver that nostalgia by combining it with a convenient, uninterrupted sense of character achievement that fundamentally changes the world in which it exists.
A world where your story is important.
Exactly. A world where you actually make a difference, like they would in a very long-term role-playing game. If you already have a gaming group that has managed to keep a game going for 10 years with the same players and characters shaping that world, you win. You don't need a virtual tabletop.
Just ignore it.
Yeah. Just like Kindle and PDFs have not stopped the people who love physical books from owning books, it just makes it faster to decide if you really want the physical version taking up limited shelf space.
So getting back to the Wizards of the Coast app, do you think it will limit the imagination of new players?
Definitely not. Not if they get it right.
Sounds like a big if.
When I spoke to my youngest son about it, I'll just quote his words. He said, "It will open a huge door for creators if they allow a marketplace of assets that are created by the players."
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we will have to wait and see. They're planning on using Unreal Engine. It's going to look very flashy, a little bit like a video game. And let's just see. Let's see what actually happens. It's a long way off. But if more players can discover D&D because they enjoy the Witcher 3 video game, and D&D is going to be 1,000 times more accessible because it's tapping into the video gamers, sort of making it more appealing to the video gamers, then I just trust that those players will eventually discover the drive-through RPG market where you can buy independent, obscure role-playing games. I think they'll find the tabletop version of Witcher 3. I think they'll find Vampire the Masquerade. And they'll find that obscure role-playing game that casts them as a mutant humanoid rat living deep below a 1980s retro-futuristic cyberpunk city.
Underpunks? Well, as a mutant humanoid rat who lives deep below a 1980s retro-futuristic cyberpunk city, it really resonates with me.
That recording was from one of your long-time loyal fans, Jaydz.
We love you, Web.
We love you, Web. Humanoid rats living deep below a 1980s retro-futuristic cyberpunk city. That's Underpunks.
That's Underpunks. In Underpunks, all weapons, NPCs, and loot items exist on one of the most digitally advanced platforms available online, the blockchain.
But you're not a cash-grabbing NFT flipping scheme.
Certainly not. We do it very differently. First of all, we don't hit our players with a wall of techno jargon, expense to get into the game, or any of that kind of over-technical blockchain friction before they even play the game. You just join the Discord and you won't actually realise you're on the blockchain.
Underpunks is just a really good game.
Underpunks is a fantastic game, and that's the goal of Underpunks, really, is to just make a good game.
How does such an obscure game survive, Jaydz?
Underpunks derives no profit from the actual NFTs. So all of our support that goes into paying the wage of development actually just comes from Patreon, from our supporters. 100% of that. We don't even have any recommission fees on players selling their NFTs. We're actually not involved in any of that. It is directly supported by the fans, who are people from across the globe. And most of them are people who have played a tabletop role-playing game, or they've played a LARP, a live action role-playing game.
Or played a text-based multi-user dungeon game.
Yeah, or even play-by-email game if we want to go back even further. And some of them still do that. Many of them are still LARPing and role-playing.
Underpunks is free to play. How great is that?
Underpunks is actually now completely free to play. You don't need to support on Patreon. You don't need to buy an NFT. There are plenty of ways where you can just work your way through the progress. And buying an NFT or buying into the game or spending money doesn't actually put you in some massive advantage. It's the time that you put into the game that actually makes the biggest difference. But it's nostalgia that makes the game successful.
And hosting it on your mobile phone via Discord makes the game, I think, very convenient.
So convenient. I think saving the game, first of all, Discord takes care of all of the communication side of things, so the community. So we're kind of built, instead of trying to add communication and guild chat and being able to talk to other players to the game, we've done the opposite. We've picked one of the most popular communication apps for gamers, which is Discord, and we've kind of built the game onto that. So the game is saved for you on a database, which is just a logical, essential thing to have happen and should be happening with D&D. You know, when you're doing pen and paper, it's, you know, you have to keep track of that, and so does the GM. And
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work and a lot of setup, and they have to be kept until the group next meets and brought together. So saving the game to a database, which is hopefully what will be happening with the One D&D app, I think is logical and an essential move. And for Underpunks, the Dungeon Master, we've actually got it programmed into the Discord bot so that you can do your actions anytime you like. 3 a.m, in the middle of work, doesn't matter. You just do your action when you can.
It's so good. And Underpunks, I'm happy to say this, is girlfriend friendly.
The dungeon rooms have a slow mode timer, so yes, it's work friendly, it's partner friendly. Take a toilet break, do a 10-second action and walk away. But if you do have a spare hour where you just want to pour yourself into Underpunks, then you just move to a different room in the dungeon that has a shorter timer. So if you want to play every 6 hours, you can do that. If you want to play every 10 minutes, you can do that. You just go to a different place.
And you're the GM, Jaydz. You're the computer programmer, you're the artist, you're the musician, and a storyteller who creates the world.
I think, well, firstly, I am.
You're so ace, Jaydz.
Thank you. But any player can shape this world. It's very important that when I built the game, that you weren't just playing my game, that you actually get a chance to be a pseudo GM and shape the world without having to do all the work that a GM normally does. So in Underpunks, you can own a corporation. You can shape the direction of one of the shires. You can have the actions that you're investing in come back on your character even when you're not online.
So summing up?
Well, let's go back to the One D&D above all. The main reason why I think the One D&D Virtual Tabletop app will be good for everyone is it will save your freaking game. In the words of my eldest son, an avid dungeon master who has just had a baby, so experiencing some of that lack of time, he said anything that makes it less of a 6-hour session would be great. Well, I think this is the big key if, for me. If Wizards of the Coast can save your game so that it's just easier, if they can provide a platform that just allows you to pack up a game in 10 seconds and then restart it in 5 with everything exactly where you left off, whether you're using that in a live scenario or offline or online or however you're using it, if they can save the game, then it's just going to be a game changer. If they can make it that easy to play a game of D&D on a Tuesday night after the kids have gone to bed and before you set your alarm for work in the morning, it's going to be a huge win for the entire role-playing community.
Such a huge win. Such a game changer.
Completely. An unbroken player experience, and that is what builds a strong community. And whether that's your local gaming group or the whole of the D&D community, or it's Underpunks.
Your community is really strong. Yeah.
And that's why it's actually possible for us to have an obscure game like Underpunks be so successful.
With just about 200 players?
With 200 players playing a role-playing game.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jaydz.
Thank you,
I
Benita.
really love Underpunks. I really do. I agree with those other people who talked in your recordings.
I'm very much in love with the game because of the community and because of where it's going. It surprises me as much as it surprises them where the world of Underpunks is going.
We get so many love letters from
We get a lot of love
from
letters.
your players. Like, I think every day. I think every day for months and months and months, you're showing me something that one of your players has said about, Jaydz, I love your art. I love this story. I love that room. I love how there's this rule, this thing that you can get when you do something else. And so heartwarming.
And quite often it'll just bring a tear to my eye. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Links are in the description. I'll let Benita sign off.
Yeah, let's sign off. How shall I sign off?
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a very important message. Here is our field reporter, Gary. What is it, Gary? Underpunks. Okay, well, thanks, Gary. There you have it, folks.